teachings are instruction in religion. Certainly the material we've been looking at is instruction in religion. This is a comprehensive view of Freemasonry by Henry Wilson Coyle, 33rd degree. Coyle is a highly respected Mason. He wrote this book, and he also wrote Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia. So he is a well-recognized authority. There's a portrait of Coyle, which appears on the back cover of the book. It also notes that he's an attorney, or was an attorney. Here's the title page. We notice that he's the chairman of the Committee on Masonic Information for the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of California. Looking down at the bottom, we notice that McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply publishes this book. They're the leading Masonic publisher. Let's see what Coyle's opinion about Masonry as a religion is. He says to call Masonry not religion, but religious, merely substitutes an adjective for a noun, both meaning the same thing. It is as absurd as saying that a certain individual has no intellect, but is intellectual, or that he has no wealth, but is wealthy. Conversations on Freemasonry is another book that Henry Wilson Coyle wrote, and we can see down at the bottom that it also was published by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company. This is the beginning of Chapter 5. It starts on page 163. And Coyle writes, Masonic writers have differed. Mackey called Freemasonry a religion. Pike dissented. Pike argued that one could not hold two religions at the same time, and hence a Christian, a Jew, or a Mohammedan who retained his religion could not accept Masonry also as a religion. Therefore, he said, Masonry could not be a religion. Well, that's rather absurd logic. Who is the God of Freemasonry? How can we be sure of his true identity? Let's take a look at the Kentucky Monitor. This is page 116. They have some text on the all-seeing eye, which is the eye of Osiris. In most of the ancient languages of Asia, eye and sun are expressed by the same word, and the ancient Egyptians hieroglyphically represented their principal deity, the sun god Osiris, by the figure of an open eye. In like manner, Masons have emblematically represented the omniscience of the great architect of the universe. This is Mackey's Revised Encyclopedia. It's one of the most popular Masonic encyclopedias ever written. Mackey is one of the most widely respected Masonic authorities. There are various editions of this encyclopedia, and the page numbers are different in the various versions, so if you look up some of the material, go by the alphabetical listing of the topics rather than the page number. Here's the title page, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, and it is in fact written by Albert G. Mackey. Here's a portrait of Mackey, so you can get an idea what he looked like. This is the article on Bell, which appears on page 130 of this particular edition of Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Bel, spelled B-E-L, is usually pronounced Bel, but both Strong in his Hebrew dictionary and Fariabin in his prefer to say Baal. The word is probably the contracted form of some other Hebrew word, commonly pronounced Baal and spelled B-A-A-L, and he was worshipped by the Babylonians as their chief deity. At the top of the next column, we read that Baal signifies Lord or Master. Alone, the word applies to the sun god. With Jah and On, it has been introduced into the Royal Arch system as a representative of the Tetragrammaton. In the Royal Arch degree, that's part of the York Rite, the secret name of God is supposedly revealed. It is Jebulon. Jah stands for Jehovah, Bull stands for Baal, and On is a corruption of Osiris. The God of the Masonic Lodge is identified with Baal and Osiris. Yahweh, the God of the Bible, would not be pleased to be associated with them. We see that Masonry apparently worships several gods. Osiris and Baal are among them. There is one God which they refuse to worship, and that is Jesus. I'm going to show you some text on page 65 of The Lost Keys of Freemasonry by Manly Palmer Hall. Hall writes, "The true Mason is not creed-bound. He realizes with the divine illumination of his lodge that as a Mason his religion must be universal. Christ, Buddha, or Mohammed, the name means little, for he recognizes only the light and not the bearer. He worships at every shrine, bows before every altar, whether in temple, mosque, or cathedral, realizing with his truer understanding the oneness of all spiritual truth. So we see that the true Mason is an idolater. He worships any god at any altar. We can be certain that the God which Masons have conscious union with is not God the Father because of what Jesus said. Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Paul wrote this to the Corinthians, But to us there is but one God, the Father, in whom are all things, and we in him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, by whom are all things, and we by him. Now it is clear that Masons do not attain conscious union with their God through Jesus because they deny that he is the one true Christ. From the writings of John, we can be certain that the God of the Bible is not the Masonic God. This is one of the scriptural definitions for Antichrist. Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist that denieth the Father and the Son. Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not the Father. But he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. John tells us that he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ is Antichrist. Masonry teaches that Jesus was born an ordinary man and that he became a Christ later on. He did not come as Christ in the flesh. Let's take a look at the meaning of Masonry by Lynn Perkins. Page 53, the beginning of chapter 5, which is titled Hiram, Christic Hero of Masonry. We read, Jesus of Nazareth had attained a level of consciousness of perfection that has been called by various names: cosmic consciousness, soul regeneration, philosophic initiation, spiritual illumination, Brahmic splendor, Christ consciousness. Notice that Perkins maintains that Jesus attained a level of consciousness, Christ's consciousness. He was not born a Christ. He became a Christ later on. The Christ state is something he attained. We know from the writings of John that the spirit of Masonry is Antichrist. John wrote, And every spirit that confesseth not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is not of God. And this is that spirit of Antichrist, whereof ye have heard that it should come, and even now already is it in the world. John also wrote, For many deceivers are entered into the world, who confess not that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an Antichrist. So according to the biblical definition of Antichrist, the spirit of Masonry is Antichrist. Is there anything in Masonic writings which would lead us to believe that Satan or Lucifer is the god of Freemasonry? We will fully answer that question in Part 2 with an in-depth look at Masonic writings regarding that issue. Or is the god? This book is Ancient Mysteries in Modern Masonry by the Reverend Charles H. Vail. We saw this book in Part 1, and we're going to take a look at some of the other things that are in it. This is page 26, and we're going to look at text that's further down on the page. And it reads, In all of the initiations and mysteries, the gods exhibit many forms of themselves and appear in a variety of shapes, and sometimes, indeed, a formless light of themselves is held forth to the view. Sometimes this light is according to a human form, and sometimes it proceeds into a different shape. Notice that Vail, who is quoting Taylor, states that the gods sometimes appear as a formless light. Before we take a look at the writings of Swinburne Clymer, we need to know something about Manichaeans. This is from Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Manichaeans, also termed Gnostics, it's a sect taking its rise in the middle of the 3rd century whose belief was in two eternal principles of good and evil. They derived their name from Manus. Now, Manus is spelled several different ways in the literature of Freemasonry. I want you to notice that they believed in two eternal principles of good and evil. These forces were said to be constantly opposed to one another. Their god or gods had two natures. One nature was good, the other nature was evil. We're going to take a look at the writings of Swinburne Clymer. This is the mysticism of Masonry. We can see that it's written by R. Swinburne Clymer, M.D. Manusis, spelled M-A-N-I-S-I-S, was the leader of a sect of Gnostics who were known as Manichaeans according to Albert Pike. It's on page 565. Now, Swinburne Clymer wrote in The Mysticism of Masonry on page 19, "The mysteries have now, as throughout the long ages past, for their foundation, the existence of God as Jehovah Adonai, the Father of Light." We've moved to page 52 of The Mysticism of Masonry. And Clymer writes, "This Jehovah was the avenging side of the Creator and is not the Jehovah Adonai, the Father of Light of the New Age, who is also the Father of the multitudes and the God of Manassas." Further down the page he writes, "Jehovah, the jealous God." The God of the Bible is a jealous God. This is page 29 of The Mysticism of Masonry by Clymer. And Clymer writes, "And Jehovah Adonai, that is to say, the Father of Light, spoke unto his messenger Manassas, saying, I will appear to thee in the image of light, for did I not promise those who have gone before thee that the woman clothed with the sun should be with them? And I now establish a covenant with thee, and bind my laws to a fulfillment of this covenant, that all of my children who will obey the laws shall be blessed and cheered when in misfortune or sorrow, for I shall appear to them in the fire as an angel of light." It is clear from the writings of Vail and Clymer that the God of Masonry appears as a formless light or as an angel of light. This is not a direct admission that Lucifer is the God of the Lodge. However, let's see how Paul would interpret these Masonic writings.
Yahweh.
Paul warned us that Satan could appear as an angel of light. And he wrote to the Corinthians, "And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works." This booklet is called The House of the Temple of the Supreme Council. It's a booklet that shows a lot about the building where the 33rd degree right is conferred in Washington, D.C. And I want to show you a little bit about Albert Pike in it. This is what's known as the Albert Pike Room. And I'm going to read the text that's at the right on the next page in the booklet. It says, "Lawyer, linguist, teacher, scholar, frontiersman, editor, journalist, nationally known poet, internationally known philosopher, a mind of almost unimaginable intellectual scope, a man of unlimited compassion, illustrious brother Albert Pike, Grand Commander of the Mother Jurisdiction from 1859 to 1891, is remembered and honored in this room. Brother Pike used his vast talents to research and write the rituals, making them eloquent, symbolic representations of our rites history and philosophy. A number of his handwritten manuscripts and the quill pen he fashioned himself are on display in the Pike Room. Also on display is a miniature model of a monument honoring Grand Commander Pike. The original life-size monument is located on Indiana Avenue Northwest in Washington, D.C., between the Municipal Center and the Department of Labor building. Albert Pike remains today an inspiration for Masons everywhere. His great book, Morals and Dogma, endures as the most complete exposition of Scottish Rite philosophy. He will always be remembered and revered as the master builder of the Scottish Rite. Now, Morals and Dogma has been previously mentioned. It was written by Albert Pike and published by the Supreme Council of the 33rd Degree. Remember that Pike's book, Morals and Dogma, is considered to be the apex of the teachings of the Scottish Rite, according to Fred Kleinknecht, the present Sovereign Grand Commander. Now we notice further down the page that this is an esoteric book. It means hidden knowledge. And it's a book that the Masons would like to make sure doesn't get into the wrong hands. Here is a portrait of Albert Pike. He died in 1891 and was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Later, following an act of Congress, his body was moved to a tomb in the House of the Temple, where the 33rd degree is conferred. Now Pike writes on page 741 that Masonry is a search after light. Just about every Mason knows that. Pike reveals the source of Masonic light on page 321. Lucifer, the light bearer, strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning, is it he who bears the light, and with its splendors intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not, for traditions are full of divine revelations and inspirations. Pike clearly reveals that Lucifer bears the light of Freemasonry. I want to remind you that this book is the apex of the teachings of the Scottish Rite. Here is the November 1990 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. This is the house organ of the Supreme Council of the Southern Jurisdiction. This is the title page of the November 1990 issue. And we'll look down at the bottom, and we notice on page 22 that there's an article about Manly Palmer Hall. This is the article that begins on page 22, and it turns out that it's the obituary for Manly Palmer Hall. And it reads, "Illustrious Manly Palmer Hall, often called Masonry's greatest philosopher, and he departed his earthly labors peacefully in his sleep on August 7th, 1990. Further down the page we read, "He is best known for writing The Lost Keys of Freemasonry in 1923, and of course his monumental encyclopedic outline of Masonic history, philosophy, and related subjects." Now we notice that he received the Scottish Rite's highest honor, the Grand Cross, in 1985 because of his exceptional contributions to Freemasonry, the Scottish Rite, and the public good. Like Grand Commander Albert Pike before him, illustrious Hall did not teach a new doctrine, but was an ambassador of an ageless tradition of wisdom that enriches us to this day. The world is a far better place because of Manly Palmer Hall, and we are better persons for having known him and his work. This is a glowing tribute to Hall. They've lifted up 4 of his 50 books. We're going to look at 2 of the 4. With an obituary like that, anything Manly Palmer Hall wrote in those books is endorsed by the Scottish Rite. We will recognize that what Hall wrote agrees with other Masonic writers such as Pike, and indeed it is an ageless wisdom. This is the catalog cut in McCoy's catalog, McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company. They are the leading Masonic publisher. Take a look at how they advertise The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. It's a book for the Mason and non-Mason, revealing the profounder aspects of an ancient fraternity which has always wrought for the benefit of mankind. This book is one to be read over and over again. This is the title page for The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, and if we look down at the bottom, we see that, in fact, it is published by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company. Now, on page 48, we find some of the ageless wisdom of Freemasonry. When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy. This is from page 42 of the Masonic textbook of West Virginia. I want you to notice the star in the center of the carpet. How many points are up, or pointing up? 2. On the facing page, page 43, we find that the blazing star is an emblem of deity. So this star with 2 points up represents the Masonic God. This is the entrance to the Grand Lodge of Indiana. Notice the star on the left. Here's a close-up of that star. This particular version of the star represents the Masonic organization for the female relatives of Masons. The organization is known as the Eastern Star. Notice the 5 letters in the center, F-A-T-A-L, fatal. The Eastern Star is always shown with 2 points up. This is the title page for the ritual book of the Eastern Star. We can look a little further down and we'll see that it was arranged by Robert McCoy, and it's published by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company. It's a 1943 copy. On page 11, they talk about the objects of the rite, or the purpose for its existence. It's for inciting the influence of females towards the purposes of the Masonic institution. The emblem of the Eastern Star is a 5-pointed star with 2 points up. And we see these words, "I have seen his star in the east, and have come to worship him." This is a phrase that's used to identify those members who are entitled to participate in its rituals. Now, when you hear a phrase like, "I've seen his star in the east, and I've come to worship him," the first question that comes to mind is, whose star is it? Well, you might think it's the Star of Bethlehem. But if you remember, the wise men came from the east, and they were following a star, which would have had to appear in the western sky. So it would have been a western star. So clearly the Eastern Star can't be the Star of Bethlehem. We're going to look at multiple Masonic sources to find out whose star it really is. Remember Manly Palmer Hall's obituary? They mentioned that he had written over 50 books, and they lifted up 4 of them. And I told you that we would look at 2 of them. The first one we looked at was The Lost Keys of Freemasonry. The second one we're going to look at is an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy. It also goes by another title, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This is the hardback version of the book, and it's got The Secret Teachings of All Ages on the spine. This is the paperback version, and it goes by the title, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This is a large book. It's about 14 or 15 inches high. Here's the title page. We notice that it is written by Manly Palmer Hall. Hand corner with a close-up. Manly Palmer Hall, Masonry's greatest philosopher, reveals the secret behind the five-pointed star. When used in black magic, the pentagram is called the sign of the cloven hoof, or the footprint of the devil. The star with 2 points upward is also called the goat of Mendez, because the inverted star is the same shape as the goat's head. When the upper star turns and the upper point falls to the bottom, it signifies the fall of the morning star. Here is a drawing of the goat of Mendez, who is also known as Baphomet. This is found on page CI of Hall's book. This is the back cover of a book written by Aleister Crowley. Notice the symbol to the left of the word Baphomet. That's known as the Siegel of Baphomet. This is the signature of C. Fred Kleinknecht, which is found in the November 1990 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. Notice that he affixes the Siegel of Baphomet to the left of his name. This is a portrait of Fred Kleinknecht, which is in A Bridge to Light. You notice that he also has the Siegel of Baphomet on his hat piece. Recently, in Masonic publications, they've been trying to deny that the Siegel of Baphomet was really the Siegel of Baphomet. What they claim it is the Cross of Salem. But this is a copy of, a Xerox copy of a book that's published by Llewellyn Publications. They're a leading publisher of occult material. And we can see that they refer to this symbol as the Siegel of Baphomet. It's well known in occult literature that this is, in fact, the Siegel of Baphomet. This book is a history of Freemasonry and concordant orders. It was written just before the turn of the century. Here's the title page. We notice again its history of the ancient and honorable fraternity of free and accepted Masons and concordant orders. And we notice it's written by a board of editors, and a man named William James Hunan is listed second there as the European editor. He's the man that I mentioned you should remember in the West Virginia Monitor. At the bottom we can see that it's dated 1891. This book also contains information about the secret of the Eastern Star. This is page 101. We read, when the pentagram elevates two of its points, it represents Satan, or the goat of the mysteries, and when it elevates one of its points only, it represents the Savior, goodness, virtue. Another entry in the same book states it slightly differently. This is on page 49. This star represents God, all that is pure, virtuous, and good, when represented with 1 point upward. But when turned with 1 point down, it represents evil, all that is opposed to the good, pure, and virtuous. In fine, it represents the goat of Mendez. So when the ladies at the Eastern Star are saying, I have seen his star in the East and I've come to worship him, what they're really saying is that they're attending the Eastern Star meetings to worship Satan. Is there any direct evidence from Masonic literature that they would provide information or instruction to conjure Satan or his demons? This book is The Builders. It was written by Joseph Fort Newton in 1914. It's the classic which today is often presented to newly raised Master Masons. The bibliography contains references to most of the major books and authors which reveal the hidden meanings behind Masonry. This is page 57. It's a page in the chapter on the secret doctrine. We look down at the bottom of the page and it says, perhaps the greatest student in this field of esoteric teaching and method, certainly the greatest now living, is Arthur Edward Waite, to whom it is a pleasure to pay tribute. Now it also says that Waite died in 1942. This book was written in 1914, so that's why they say the greatest student now living. The tribute continues through page 61. Newton speaks of Waite's writings as a series of volumes noble in form, united in aim, unique in wealth, and revealing beauty, and of unequaled worth. Waite, who until his death in 1945 was considered to be a great student of the secret doctrine, wrote this Masonic encyclopedia, a new encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Waite translated this book on transcendental magic. Waite also wrote the Book of Black Magic. On the title page, under his name, we find that he wrote a book entitled Devil Worship in France. On page 244 through 248 of the Book of Black Magic, we find detailed instructions on how to conjure Lucifer. I'm not going to read this. I'll leave it on the screen for a few seconds and let you read enough of it. This book was published by the authority of the Supreme Council of the 33rd Degree. It has a bibliography listing selected references in the back. It's known as a Bridge to Light. Here's the title page. And we can see down at the bottom that it was, in fact, written with the authorization of the Supreme Council. And it's a fairly recent book, 1988. The foreword was by Fred Kleinknecht. We've already seen that. Here's the selected references, which are found on page 329 of A Bridge to Light. And we notice down at the bottom that they recommend Manly Palmer Hall's 1928 Secret Teachings of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy. Now, we've already seen this book, but it has some additional information about conjuring demons that I want to show you. This is a close-up of the top half of the title page of The Secret Teachings of All Ages. I just wanted to show you or point out the Rosicrucian word there. I want you to notice the Rosicrucian connection. Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbological philosophy is the other title. This is the full page of the chapter heading on ceremonial magic and sorcery in Hall's book. I'm going to do a close-up of the left-hand top of the page. Hall writes, ceremonial magic is the ancient art of invoking and controlling spirits by a scientific application of certain formula. And down below he writes, while the elaborate ceremonial magic of antiquity was not necessarily evil. Well, believe me, what Hall is talking about here is conjuring demons, and it is extremely evil. On the right, we have page CIII. We're going to zoom in on the center of the left column, and then the top portion of the right column. The section heading here is modus operandi for the invocation of spirits. This is a rather nice way to say the methods to be used to conjure demons. This is the top right portion of the page. I'm not going to read this. I'll let you read it.